Hello there, guys. Hope you're all doing really well on this Wednesday evening. It is now UK time. I thought I'd do a live preview. I haven't done a live preview before. Please let me know in the live chat if everything's coming through okay and you're doing okay on this Wednesday before we do get to tomorrow night's game at Stamford Bridge against Spurs. It's narratively one of the most juicy, is that the right word? Tense and kind of fascinating ones for Chelsea and Spurs, Mauricio Pochettino, and that's even with the backdrop, of course, of the rivalry between both clubs. I think in this preview, it's going to be a case of obviously looking at the injury situation. I mean, that's the title of this show and this preview. It has to be because if you haven't seen, if you haven't been updated yet, 14 players out injured. I think CFC Daily made like a graph or something where he said that this is a new record. We have reached a new record today for injured players. And it's been bad all year, but 14 players at the start of May is just insane. And given the season effectively ends in 2 weeks, I'd be quite stunned if it's under 10 again this year. So it feels like it's been a regular thing each week. We talk about the injuries, we say how bad they are, we say how much it needs to be rectified in the summer. We hope it can be, but it remains a real problem. The shame of it is we have seen photos of the likes of Christopher Nkunku, Levi Colwell, Reece James out on the training pitch at Cobham, and it doesn't seem like, based on Mauricio Pochettino's comments, the club themselves even put out this screenshot of I'll put it on screen now, of Christopher Nkunku with the caption "back in full team training." So they're promoting the fact that he's back in full team training, but based on Pochettino's comments, unless the embargoed stuff gives us like some big surprise at the end of tonight, where they'll release the comments from the press conference that we haven't seen, he made it seem like there's no major change with who's available and who's not. So we have to go based on the injury update list, which, looking at it in its full, Levi Colwell, Christopher Nkunku, Reece James, Robert Sanchez, Raheem Sterling, they're all in partial team training. And then you go into also in partial team training is Leslie Ogochukwu. And then you go into Axel Disasi, who's undergoing medical assessment. So he came off the bench against Villa and he's injured. Thiago Silva undergoing rehab program. I think we suspected he was going to be out at least for this game based on the way he left the game against Villa at the weekend. And then you've also got Chukwuemeka, Enzo Fernandez, and Ben Chilwell, Malo Gusto, Wesley Fofana, and Romeo Lavia. All of those players out. So it does sort of, again, limit the options, or the obvious options, I think, from Mauricio Pochettino. He was asked about whether he's going to give some minutes to young players. And we saw at the weekend that he is unlikely to do so off the bench. I think if you're referring to Alfie Gilchrist as that player, Cesare Casadei, maybe a very, very small cameo right at the end for David Washington. Other than that, I mean, I'd be quite stunned if there are major shocks in that starting 11 tomorrow, which we'll get to. Talking a little bit about Spurs, because they're a fascinating team. I think they're a fascinating team for a couple of reasons. Because obviously under Ange Postecoglou this year, they have improved. I think there is, as much as a Chelsea fan kind of wants to deny that improvement, and even though they haven't won a trophy, they're not going to end this year with like major silverware. It doesn't feel like the transformative year that it could have been. He clearly has improved from what they were under Antonio Conte. I think they're a better team than what they were under Jose Mourinho. But defensively, as we saw back in November, as we have seen in recent weeks when Spurs have had to play a higher caliber of opposition, there absolutely is room for Chelsea to hurt Spurs. And I think the main thing comes from that high line. They play a very rigid, and not rigid in the sense that they play really dull football, but Postecoglou doesn't like to adapt. He has made this so firm and clear. And I think the most extreme example of him not wanting to adapt was obviously in the game in November when they were down to 9 men and playing that ridiculous high line against Chelsea. and eventually we won the game 4-1. It was a very unique game where Chelsea won it, but there were still concerns after that game with the way Chelsea handled that situation. But we know the threat they pose in attack. Heung-min Son remains their most productive player. Richarlison, in terms of goals per minute, I think is top this season. But Son remains the big creator. Timo Werner is not going to have his Stamford Bridge return. He pulled up injured against Arsenal, isn't available for this game. And we know in defence too, Romero and Van der Ven are kind of integral to the way Spurs want to be proactive defensively and also recover too. I think that's a big question. So for me, I think with this game is that you have to factor in their attack. They will press both fullbacks forward, Porro and Destiny Udogoy. Both of them will kind of play almost inverted roles at times. I was watching a goal they scored recently against Nottingham Forest where ball comes in from the left-hand side where they like to attack a lot. And Werner's very much been kind of looked upon as an outlet when they do break through an opponent press. They do look to the left and then get a ball in the 6-yard box. And you have Destiny Udogoy or Pedro Porro in the middle. And both of them can, score. I think Porro scored a couple of goals himself. So they will flood players forward. We know Chelsea defensively have been very woeful this season. There's no way getting around it. But I think in the other way, that high line remains very tempting and I think enticing to teams who do have speed in transition. And we know down the channel, we know just in general, Nicholas Jackson is a fast player. Mykhailo Mudryk, for all his flaws, is a fast player. I even think Cole Palmer, Cole Palmer's not the fastest player, but, could as well with his intricate movement and also his passing to maybe release someone else. Can be quite a devastating player. And I also obviously think that Noni Madueke too, after his performance at the weekend. So there, I think, is ample opportunity here for Chelsea to exploit Spurs. I think the big thing you have to think about with Spurs and watching them against Arsenal, watching them against Newcastle, it is so reliant on Van der Ven, especially him with his speed, to cover when they do lose the ball. And I think if you're able to maybe switch play, look to the opposite side to him, if you get round him, if you can start to maybe isolate someone like Ben Davis, who played at the weekend against Arsenal, they have real problems. And it kind of feels like at times, if things aren't clicking in the final third, they will still play that high line. They're not going to retreat. And then you can get at them. So if I'm Pochettino, that's where I'm mainly looking. I do think that Spurs are kind of in this weird place where it looks like Champions League football is maybe just beyond them this season. It's not completely out of the question because Villa, as Chelsea did themselves, got points off Aston Villa at the weekend. But it's not quite, what it could have been this season for Spurs and for Postecoglou. So they're kind of settled in Europa League football, I think, and they'll want to kind of solidify that. But as well, historically with this game, they've always struggled at Stamford Bridge, and Pochettino was the last coach and the first in many decades, one of the only Spurs coach to win at Stamford Bridge. So for him, he cannot afford to lose this game at Stamford Bridge, given the way people feel about Pochettino at the moment, given the way people feel about the club at the moment. And I would really hope that after the positivity, or at least optimism of the other night against Aston Villa, that second half, we can bring a lot of that into this game, because European football is still a realistic possibility for Chelsea. It is, because the teams around us continue to drop points. We say this before every game. That doesn't mean Chelsea are going to capitalize on it. But whilst that's still alive, there still is something to fight for. So I'm going to get into my team now. And I think that it's definitely one. I'll make sure I pick up the right one here. There we go. I'll make that a little bit bigger. There we go. So the team there, I've got the team up here that I've gone with. Unfortunately, don't have my main tactical pad at the moment, so I'm using something else. But I'll read out the team if you're listening back on the podcast. Petrovic in goal. Who else is going to play in this role at the moment? I think he has slightly got worse as the season's gone on. I still think he has made some big saves. I think about the Arsenal game, to be honest, where he made a couple of big reaction saves. And is this an area Chelsea recruiting in the summer? I think they probably should be looking to strengthen, but you need to get someone like Sanchez off the books. You need to get Kepa off the books. But hopefully Petrovic can end the season well, because For a player of his age, I think it still should be looked upon as a decent season, not an amazing season, but a decent season given he was brought as a backup and he quickly became number one. Now, as you can see, I haven't put a 4-2-3-1, which is what we're kind of used to as the formation, because if you, as was a lot of the discourse post Villa, was how Chelsea adapted in that second half and why they were so good. And it sort of more looked like a 3-5-2, where at the weekend you had Chalobah, Silva, and Badiashile as the back three. Then you had a midfield three where Cucurella kind of went more central to add an extra body in the centre to keep the ball with Caicedo and Gallagher. Gallagher was absolutely pushing forward. Caicedo winning those second balls, having a really dominant half. Madueke and Mudryk effectively as wing backs, and then Palmer just playing behind Nicholas Jackson. I think this worked really well. Cucurella has flaws defensively one-on-one. I think in possession, I understand the benefits of this formation, but it's out of possession. I still have very big question marks over Chelsea. I really do. Because sure, to go to Villa Park and to have the level of possession we did in that second half was impressive. I think that's the highest anyone has had against Villa for some time. I believe I saw that stat after the game. So it clearly worked. But, different teams, different profiles, they're going to ask you different questions. And I still kind of wonder with Spurs in a transition point of view, even without the speed of Werner, you look at Heung-min Son, Brennan Johnson, these players can make a real difference. Kulusevski, they will hurt you. And especially Richarlison, I think is just a real handful as a centre forward. I know there's dividing opinions about his kind of demeanour, but his goal record this season has been very good. So I think as a formation based on what Chelsea needed to, which you got to remember, game state, Chelsea were 2-0 down. They had to attack in that game. They had to try and find something to get back into it. I'm not denigrating that second half performance. I think it was of high quality. But it's whether that balance between Caicedo and Gallagher can remain. I think those two work a lot better than Enzo and Caicedo do. Marc Cucurella is obviously going to be starting this game. Will he play a more central role when we're in possession, out of possession? There's still major question marks over Marc Cucurella, obviously, and also the lack of help and assistance that our fullbacks get from and our defenders get from the wingers. I mean, the Mudryk and Madueke are just so poor in this aspect, and they need to simply be better. But down the right is where Chelsea found so much joy against Aston Villa. And I think it's where Chelsea are going to be looking to create, again, obviously the way Palmer will receive the ball in deeper areas. He'll look to make runs in behind and receive passes. Nicholas Jackson, too, I think links up really well. And Conor Gallagher and Noni Madueke was just very direct. I think as a player, you see glimpses of the player that we hoped we'd sign. I think a lot more than, Mudryk is still so wayward, still so wild. I think the one thing I have hope for this game is just because of the way Spurs defend so high, you're kind of hoping that in transition, Mudryk will give you that speed. And the problem is, if we believe Mauricio Pochettino that there's no Nkunku and there's no Raheem Sterling, who plays instead of these options? I would like to see Tyreek George given some minutes. I would like to see some of the other youngsters given opportunities too. But I think it's just unrealistic based on the minutes we've seen. I mean, Leo Castledine, I do wonder if he had more minutes this season, what would we have seen? Shane comments here, another Nicholas Jackson hat-trick. I'd hope so, another Jackson hat-trick. I mean, that came very late in the game, but his speed and his movement, I think, could be integral to this game. I don't think that's a ridiculous point of view. And I consistently back Nicholas Jackson because I think all round his game is really, really encouraging. I really think that there is a player there to develop, whether it's out left, whether it's as a centre forward. I think time will tell. But I do think in this type of game, if you saw the equaliser that wasn't and was marginally called offside against Villa, that was a ball over the top, I believe, by Moises Caicedo against a high line like Aston Villa. I think obviously the way the game turned out in the second half was very different with the way Chelsea pressed Villa back. Now, Unai Emery and Ange Postecoglou are very different coaches. And as we saw in the game in November, it will not be a situation in any period of the game, really, where Spurs are going to relent. They're going to retreat. That's not their style. They will continue to play the way they want. If they played like that with 10 men, if they played like that with 9 men, they're obviously going to stick to it when they're with 11. The issue is with Chelsea is with such an attacking team. It's, I look at a player like Benoit Badiashile, who had a better game on the ball, but when he's off it and he's been given the ball cheaply away, you will get punished. And also in central midfield, those gaps are appearing. But Caicedo looked a lot freer. He looks a lot more freer and kind of more precise in the way he plays. I don't know if it's a fact that maybe because he doesn't have Enzo there and he has a more mobile player in Conor Gallagher assisting him, he feels like he has to do kind of less work, or he doesn't have to cover for as much of Enzo. That balance is just not working, unfortunately, and we won't see it until pre-season at least. So those are kind of my thoughts about the game. I think there is absolutely room for Chelsea to win this game. I think there will be ample opportunity, and I hope that the players respond and turn up, because if they can respond in a real positive way, you beat Spurs in a season. I know it's kind of become expected and it's kind of like something Chelsea just do, but it does mean a lot to fans. It really does. And I think that a high level performance could make a lot of difference. It will be a young Chelsea team. Alfie Gilchrist is likely to be starting this game, only his second Premier League start, and he got a real bruising when he played against Arsenal. Trevor Chalobah will be starting. It's going to be a very, very young team. That doesn't mean it can't perform well, but that's what the squad is at the moment. There isn't really much room for manoeuvre for Mauricio Pochettino because of the options and the lack of them. 14 players injured in May. I've never seen something like it. And we cannot be sat here in 12 months' time, 14 or more players injured at the end of a season, because it's simply very, very hard to overcome. So that is my preview. Before I do go, we have got the 15% discount. I keep on bringing these up, but they are really cool. The collectibles, the metal home shirts from Alloy Collectors. And I've been doing a giveaway in the comments to this video. If you're watching it back, give me your favorite Thiago Silva Chelsea moment. We're doing a giveaway between now and the end of the season for one of those. And as well, go over to Tifo, link in the description box below, where I'll be doing a live watch along of the game against Spurs tomorrow night. So you can join. We'll watch the game together. Hopefully it's a positive one. And the cool thing is, hopefully going to be able to get some people up on the show to have conversations with me. That's the really cool thing about Tifo. It is very much community led and wanting to get people involved in a conversation. So building a community over there. If you haven't joined already, it's free to do so. Just use my referral code CFC and you'll be able to sign up and then follow and become a member of Son of Chelsea on Tifo, where we're going to be doing a lot of content over the summer with the Euros and doing more live content, which hopefully you guys are interested in. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Follow me across socials at Son of Chelsea, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.